The show is called In Honor Of. It's a show for veterans and their families, and also for the general public. Today we have a very special guest with us, a fellow veteran, Jerry Ashton. Jerry, would you like to talk a little bit about yourself and your service to our country?
Sure, but first let me thank you for having me on your show. And I want to thank the people watching and listening to what we have to say, because you perform a tremendous service, and that is bringing awareness to the veterans, the veteran families and their families, and what wrongs there are that need to be righted, and wonderful things that are happening that people don't know about that veterans are doing.
Yep.
So in my case, left a small town in Medford, Oregon, the summer of 1955. Can you go back that far in your memory?
I was around.
You were a little one.
Yep.
Well, in 1955, I joined the Navy.
Okay.
And variously over the next 4 years of service, I was first at boot camp in San Diego,
Okay.
and then I was at journalist school in Great Lakes. Then they transferred me to a heavy cruiser out of Long Beach, California. A cruiser is over a football field long, and 1,000 men on board that. They were all men at that time.
Yes.
Were on board that. And from the heavy cruiser going through the South Pacific, I was the only military journalist who covered the 1956 Olympics.
Ah, very nice.
So that was, you might call that pretty good duty.
Yeah, I think so.
And then I was sent to the Barbers Point Naval Air Station in Hawaii.
Okay.
Another tough duty station.
Oh yeah, you had some real rough ones.
Yes, I make you look like a hero compared to what I had, for sure. And then I ended up with a Seabee base in Southern California. And in all these cases, my job as a journalist was to bring out stories about veterans, bring out the stories of what they do, how they do it, and send it to hometown papers.
Sure.
Because, everybody watching here is a hometown person, but you don't really know that much about your sons and daughters who are serving the military. So I felt I was doing a pretty good service.
That's good. Well, today we're going to talk about a much more serious topic, and potentially one of the ways to help alleviate some of the issues. And we've talked many times on this show about veteran suicide, and it is a very high number. It's definitely more than 20 a day that are taking their own lives. And there are many, many different reasons for it. Many of us have been exposed to that. I'll give a little bit of insight into my own personal experience with it. But we've got to try every method possible to reduce the potential for somebody to decide to take their life. Yeah. So, and I know your program is one of those, and we'll get into that in a minute, but there are a number of really important things that we can do to make life just a little easier for the veteran or the active duty service member. In the case that I was going to talk about, it was an active duty service member who decided to try to take his own life. And part of it was he made poor decisions. It
got into unfortunate circumstances.
He married somebody off the internet, never had met her before, and she basically took all of his money, so he had nothing. And he also had a stroke after that, so he had medical issues on top of that, and decided he was going to take his life. And fortunately, I happened to be talking to him because I would check in on him periodically. I knew he was in the hospital, and I just felt he was going to kill himself, just from the way he was talking. And as a high-ranking officer, I was able to call the hospital back when he hung up and say, "You need to go up there right now," because and he tried to kill himself with a bottle of pills.
Yeah.
So, and probably would have been successful because at that time they were not checking up on him, and hey, he would have been gone to sleep and never woke up. But part of the impetus for that was he had no funds because she had
Taking all that
misappropriated, shall we say.
Yes.
And it's a common theme. We try to tell our junior enlisted, be very careful what you do, particularly when you're deployed, because things like unlimited power of attorney can really work against you.
Yeah.
And there's always somebody that, hey, she ran off with somebody or he ran off with somebody, and I've seen both cases.
Well, you know what? You're hitting on a very important point. Let me explain to the audience that veteran suicide and active duty suicides are a scourge in our military service.
Yes.
And they are doing their best, they being the VA hospital systems and what have you, to attempt to reduce the rate of veteran suicide. And then you say, well, very simple, stop bad things upstream from happening to them. That's a pretty good idea, because once somebody has suicidal ideation, it's difficult that it continues to visit them,
Yep.
especially with the stressors.
Yep.
And the work that I'm doing in my charity, which is called End Veteran Debt, endveterandebt.org, is to take a look at those items that are called social determinants
Yep.
of health. A social determinant, for example, if someone is not in an area where good food can be purchased, they're in a food desert. Well, that's a social determinant for poor health.
Yep.
And I could give a few other examples.
Another one is right here on Staten Island, where you have a large number of junior enlisted personnel that are living in an extremely expensive area and can't afford to feed their children.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that we have a food pantry here at the Coast Guard base on Staten Island, because they can't afford to feed them.
Yeah.
And the sad part to me is that that's very similar. I served in Germany in the 80s, and we used to advise our junior enlisted, do not bring your family over here because you can't afford to live on the economy. And of course, that's not going to stop somebody from bringing their family over.
No.
So we had to open the mess hall. Sorry, now they call it a dining facility.
Or dining facility.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Same place, just
Same
different
place.
name.
Yep.
But, and we would have a family meeting in the dining facility, and there would just happen to be food there.
Just happened to be food there.
So the kids could at least get a
That's
meal
great.
once a week. But, we weren't supposed to be feeding the dependents, but the fact of the matter was you couldn't let the kids starve.
Yeah.
Well, here it is 40 years later, and you got the same situation.
Yes.
And food is one of the big determinants. But debt is the
health.
second determinant of, and it's a stressor. It's an absolute stressor on people's lives.
Okay. So let's take a look at what this charity, End Veteran Debt, does.
Sure.
Being a former Navy journalist,
Yep.
the power of the media to make someone aware of something, just like what's happening right now. The power of the media that will bring to light something that, gee, I never knew that. I didn't understand that. How many people might be listening right now and said, well, I always thought our service people would be well paid, well trained, nourished. And of course, it ain't so. And we could go into another program for that. But let's take a look at the suicide. The combination of debt and suicide. What do you mean by that? I can understand that if my wife leaves me, if I lose a job, if I have PTSD, if I'm homeless, I can understand how that would lead me to suicidal ideation and the act itself. What's debt got to do with any of that? Well, I can guarantee you, job loss, there's either debt before it, during it, or after it.
Yep.
Wife walks out or husband walks out, debt.
No, he's going to be dead.
That's a big one. And you take a look at just here and now small debt. For example, if I don't have gas in my tank to get me to that job, I don't have that job.
Yep.
It might be the fact that our mortgage is due. It's the third payment we missed, and if we don't pay that, we're on the street and homeless, and you're back to debt again.
Yep.
So I cannot stress you enough, and it's been proven that debt is a proven social determinant of suicide. So how are we going to get rid of that? Well, number one, you've got to be aware of it. If you don't know about a problem, how in the world can you solve that problem?
Can you give us a little background on how a veteran or service member might end up in debt, medical debt in particular?
Prior to starting the foundation in veteran debt, I co-founded a charity called RIP Medical Debt.
Yep.
And that was 10 years ago, 2014. And those of you who are listening to the news every day and you see how medical debt is doing this, medical debt is doing that, 10 years ago, that wasn't even thought about until I and a partner in the collections industry, because that's my background, I and a partner decided that we were going to change our profession. So we, instead of becoming debt collectors, we became debt forgivers.
Okay.
And that charity has forgiven close to $15 billion worth of debt for 2.75 million Americans. So I got my grounding in how to raise money to get rid of medical debt, but when I discovered that there were veterans in the debt that we were purchasing, and by the way, for those who don't understand how debt gets in the hands of debt collectors, the creditor will sell that debt to debt buyers, and for pennies on the dollar, who then sell it to collection agencies for pennies on the dollar, and then they start pursuing you to the ends of the earth.
Yep. And you're easy to locate if you're in the military.
Oh, you're a nice touch if you are, because once again, they don't allow this, but you could call the base and say, that soldier owes us money, and guess what happens to that soldier?
He's going to lose his security clearance for sure.
For sure. So when you see what debt can do to people and the way that it's pursued, our decision was to change the tone of things. So we created a charity, and we got a lot of publicity about the work we were doing because, getting rid of debt, people you don't even know. I mean, I don't even need Christmas cards from these people.
Yep. But you don't even really know who they are, correct?
Well, actually, we don't know who they are when we buy the debt. But when we get the debt, we send out letters letting people know that debt is off the back, and if there's a credit mark, that goes off.
Okay. So even better, your credit is
it helps the credit. So I brought those skills with me to end veteran debt, but not just medical debt. It's that debt of necessity, like gas in the tank. It could be predatory debt. You walk off of any base, any military base, and you're surrounded by the car lots and the loan shops, the loan sharks, payday lenders. Yes. So this is the environment in which the service member is dealing.
Yep.
Well, the obvious things are some of them can't take that pressure and they commit suicide.
Yep.
We're here to stop that.
Okay. So give us a little bit more in depth on exactly how you would do this.
You're going to love this.
Okay.
The work that we're doing, and we're doing this in combination with your help and the people from the Staten Island organization,
the Performing Provider System?
Yes. Well, they listened to what we had to say, and they decided to partner with us in co-fundraising $50,000.
Okay.
Okay, well, that sounds like a good charitable thing. Well, what do you do with that $50,000? We're going to think globally across the country to get national attention and act locally where the need has to be met. So what we are doing together is that we're going out there, we're raising that $50,000. Some percentage goes to abolishing the veterans' debt. Some percentage goes to Staten Island, the veteran group.
Yep.
And then the other percent goes to us so that we can do our promotional and awareness campaigns, because it's all about awareness. People, if they don't know about you, they can't do anything about you. And we're here to change that.
Okay.
Now, and by the way, Does the date June 6th mean anything to you?
Wasn't that D-Day?
81 years ago,
Yep.
this year. 80 years ago, we lost 4,000 men on the beaches. 4,000 of our men. To liberate Europe. And in less than a year, they did. Well, what happened then is that in 1945, the men and women come back home and they're greeted like heroes. The GI Bill. I hate to tell you what it is now, but when you came back from the war in World War II, the amount of tuition available would be a 4-year ride to Harvard for anybody. Well, you don't get that
No.
today. So what we're doing now is we're doing a campaign called Operation Debt Day. And it's Debt Day on June 6th that we are going to shoot to abolish $80 million of the veteran debt, $1 million in honor of each of those years that have passed since.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Go a little through the mechanics about how you would actually get this debt and then get it actually.
Okay. One of the challenges that every charity has is that whatever good they're doing, very few people are aware of it. If you're the lucky few that have some magic potion, maybe you'll be recognized as a major player. But most are doing the best they can with limited funds, limited personnel, all volunteers. And of course that means that limits the amount of help that a veteran is going to get. Our job is to create an environment in which the veteran debt locally is known and has money to do more things locally. Boots on the street. If you hadn't been there at that time, at that base, at that hospital, there would be one less veteran. So we take a look at the fact that if what we can do is nationally raise awareness so that everywhere across the United States, any veteran charity will all of a sudden start getting more people paying attention to them. What are you charity people doing? And those who join with us and being able to create $1 million for the, and by the way, $1 million is only $50,000. That's all it takes to abolish $1 million for the veteran debt.
Yeah, because you're taking care of it for pennies on the dollar.
For
as you
pennies
mentioned.
on a nickel on the dollar. I mean, if a veteran's life isn't worth a nickel on a dollar, you're living in some other universe.
Some of the other things that here, and you talked a little bit about Staten Island, that a lot of people don't understand is that one of the reasons that we have to run a food pantry here on Staten Island, and one of the reasons that our veterans get into debt, is because it's a very high cost area for living, but also if you're active duty on Staten Island, you get 30% less in your BAH than in the rest of New York City.
Why?
Well,
There's some bureaucratic reason, I know.
there is a bureaucratic reason for that. It is Staten Island as a county has less than 500,000 people. And what they do then, when you have less than 500,000 people in a county, is the federal government consolidates you with another city. So they have consolidated Staten Island with Bayonne, New Jersey. Again,
Well, it's cross borders.
I think someone
Yeah.
took a dart and flipped it, and Bayonne. But in any case, so they get, if you live across the bridge in Brooklyn, you will get 30% more than you do if you live on Staten Island.
Or New Jersey.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, this makes no sense.
Oh,
Staten Island is a part of the city.
yeah.
The BAH should be the same. That pays for your housing, because there's not going to be enough housing on base.
No.
Usually the housing on base is for the senior personnel anyway. That's the way the system
Way it
works.
works.
That's why we were worried about the junior people in Germany, because they had to live on the economy. You had to go out and find an apartment to rent. And the rent was going to be more than you get in BAH.
Yeah.
So right away you're causing a problem. And here is an administrative one that we've been fighting this now for probably 15 years through our congresspersons,
Yeah.
and fighting a bureaucracy is real tough.
Yes, it
But
is.
this is this is where it is on Staten Island.
Well, here's the beautiful thing about veterans as far as the public is concerned. Presumably, veteran issues are apolitical. I don't care what.
But they can be bureaucratic.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the congressman who's more than happy to put his arms around the veteran for that photo opportunity, get more votes maybe, shown to be a wonderful person. And by the way, there are good people, and they do show faith, and they do make laws that are good for veterans. But veterans are tired of being used as props.
Yep.
We want to serve our country. How can you have people serve your country who are 2 paychecks away from bankruptcy?
Or 1 paycheck in some cases.
Or 1 paycheck for that case. Yep. So we're asking America to wake up and rethink veterans, the debt that's accrued by veterans that shouldn't even be there. And by the way, when we discovered that we were finding veterans in our portfolios we purchased at RIP Medical Debt, we went down to DC and we met with a House subcommittee on veteran health, and we said, why are all these veterans showing up with debt? Hospitals, ambulances, things like that. And they said, well, because we refused their claim.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why did you refuse their claim? They're veterans. Well, we refused their claim because they weren't in this part of the battlefield, because they didn't have a disability. And then you realize that veterans are forced into jumping through circles.
A lot of hoops.
Hoops.
Yes. Just
to get the attention they need. So that's got to change. And if you call Jerry Ashton at 347-802-7492 or go to our website, endveterandebt.org, you'll be greeted with open arms as what we can do together. Because this is a together thing. This is not just a one-off. This is not just a gesture. This is a mission to make the veterans' lives easier. Right here on Staten Island, right here in New York area, right here across our country.
Yep. So give us your website information.
Oh, I thought I'd mention that.
Oh, no, let's do it again.
endveterandebt.org. You can also go to another website called veteranmissionpossible.com, and you'll see the different organizations that are partnering with us to make things happen.
Okay. And if somebody has a debt like this,
yes,
they can contact you, or is it more of a general type of thing where you just get a lump of...
Yeah, this is an important for people to understand. When you buy debt in bulk, you buy it without knowing anybody's name. You just buy it. And then the only time we know that a certain person got it is when we send the letters out and say, on behalf of Staten Island, your debt has been resolved and your name is on that letter, they'll give you a call or they'll give us the call and we'll know who they are. Okay. So you can't ask us to eliminate your debt. What you can do is make a donation so that we can abolish someone else's debt, some veteran's debt. So every penny counts, every nickel worth 100 times that, you know. So we depend on you. You depend on us to keep you safe. We depend on you to keep us healthy.
My suggestion also would be to talk to the veterans organizations that are here on Staten Island, like the Veterans of Foreign War, the American Legion, because again, they have a vested interest in their members. And in most cases, they're about 30% of the veteran population, but we don't particularly care if you're a member or not. You're still a veteran, and we would still like you to not have this issue hanging over you and potentially threatening your life.
Well, what are the names here on Staten Island of some of the veteran groups that you're working with?
The two biggest, again, are the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign War. The Veterans of Foreign Wars will always be smaller because you had to serve in the combat zone. So, but the American Legion right now is eligible for anybody from December 7th, 1941 to current, because basically we've been at war for that entire period. You may not have known about it, but you were somewhere, somebody was in a combat zone. So that's the American Legion eligibility. As I said, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, you had to serve in the theater.
In actual theater combat.
So my eligibility for the VFW was both my service in Korea, and even though the war is not
Well, how did...
on fire at the moment, it's still considered a combat zone because that war was never resolved.
Which one is that?
Korea. So if you serve in Korea, you are eligible for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And I also served in Iraq, so I ended up in 2 combat zones. Lucky me.
Well, how do they contact? Phone book? How do they get in touch with you? I'm interested in that. I like to have everybody who's civilian, and by the way, what civilian doesn't have an uncle and aunt, and cousin who served?
Most people do.
Pretty much. And the percentage of veterans on Staten Island versus the general population is higher than any other borough in New York City.
Yes. Another good way that you can look at it is the Department of Veteran Services in New York City.
Yes.
They have 5 meetings, one for each of the counties, and talking at that meeting would also be a good place. I can put you in connection to the chairman of that board, the Veterans Advisory Board for them.
Oh, please.
And then you can talk again about this problem to a wider audience throughout the city.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're looking forward to that.
okay.
For those who would like to know more about this problem and the solutions for the problem, contact us at endveterandebt.org, endveterandebt.org. Another place to go for information on veterans would be Veteran Mission Possible, where veteran organizations across the United States who have solutions to reduce veteran suicide meet. And as a civilian or veteran, the opportunity to have your work and your efforts move this along and reduce veteran suicide is our intention, our goal, and we invite you to participate in this.
So Jerry, I'd like to thank you for coming in to talk to us today. It's a really interesting topic, and again, anything we can do to reduce the potential for suicide. We've got to take some of the stress off of our service people and our veterans if we're ever to get ahead of this suicide problem.
Yeah.
And there's just no other way around it. There's too many things that are stressing out our veterans and our soldiers, and we have to eliminate them, and this is one very big item. So again, thank you for coming. Good to meet a fellow veteran, even though you were an anchor yanker instead of an army.
You dog
right.
faces.
Ground pounders, they call us.
Ground pounders. For Jerry Ashton, you can reach me at 347-802-7492. Thank you.
Again, the show is called in honor of a show for veterans, for their families, and also for the general public. And we're going to keep bringing you information out there on how we can help our veterans and how they helped this country.